Hey guys, I've been meaning to make a video like this for a while now to kind of continue with the software series that I started a couple of weeks ago where I talked about running Windows 98 on a virtual machine on your new hardware, proving that it can be done, but it's not terribly practical. In this case, we're going to talk about something that is a little bit more practical, and we're going to take a look at something called Kali Linux. So Kali Linux is basically just a very secure version of Linux that can be used to learn cybersecurity, it can be used to learn hacking, things like that. Kali Linux is really well known for doing those kinds of things, or helping with those kinds of things rather. So what we're going to do today is actually install Kali Linux on a virtual machine through VMware made by Oracle. Those are going to be basically what the pieces that we're going to use. It's going to be Oracle VMware, and it's going to be Kali Linux, and there's also one other piece of software that we're going to need to use, which is actually a torrent software. So basically, we switch our camera angle here. This is the download page for the image, for the ISO for Kali Linux. I've got a 64-bit operating system and 16 gigs of RAM, that sort of thing. So I'm going to download the 64-bit version of Kali Linux. Of course, then you'll also need VirtualBox from Oracle. Again, we're using Windows, so we would just download the Windows host file. We would and just install that like any other normal program. And that's all you need for what we're about to do here. So the next thing, of course, is to, let's minimize that, is to come over to VirtualBox. You can see I've actually got some other operating systems in here, like this is actually a Windows 10 install. I've got a Windows 98 install that I did as a joke. I've got an Ubuntu install here. I like to play around in there every once in a while, so it's nice to have that, not have to dual boot or anything like that. But what we're going to do is click New. I'm going to call this Kali just so I can remember which one it is. We're going to say that it's Linux. This one's actually based on the Debian architecture, so I'm going to say 64-bit Debian. I'm going to give it 4 gigs of RAM. We're just going to create. We're going to go ahead and create that, the virtual hard disk, that's fine. We're going to create next, we're going to use the VDI, that's standard. We're going to do it dynamically allocated. There's explanation as far as to what those are. I'm going to click next. I'm actually going to give it, let's give it 16, oh, not 61, let's give it 16, and we'll click create. So now we've got our Kali Linux virtual computer set up, but there's some configuration we have to do on that as well. So we're going to click on settings, and this is fine. So next we're going to click on system, that's fine. I'm going to go to processor on this next tab over. I'm going to give it 2 tabs, or two processors. I'm going to say the display, I'm going to bump that up to 128 megs of video memory. Storage, I'm actually just going to go ahead and remove that. And then I'm going to add a new disk there. I'm going to say that I want this Kali Linux ISO file. Maybe. Oh, there it is. Okay. So now we've got that. Audio, I don't really care about at this point. Network, you want to set that to NAT. That's the default there, just in case you want to use the internet on this virtual machine. I've always had good luck with having that set to NAT. Serial ports we don't care about. USB, if you had a USB drive that you wanted to share between the two, or say like a webcam or something like that, you could actually go in here and say add new. And then, for instance, this Novitec Demo 1 is actually the camera that you're seeing in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. That's me. That's the little Suku action camera that I'm using there. So I wanted to share that I could. I don't really want to, but that's how you would share USB devices between the two. So I'm going to go ahead and actually remove that. Don't really care about that. You can also share folders between the two, between your, like say in this case, Windows operating system and your child operating system, in this case Linux, Kali Linux more specifically. You could go in and add a folder there, go in and select your path, whatever. We're not going to worry about that. That's not the point of this video. So we've got our operating system. We've said give it 2 CPUs. We've said give it 128 megs of storage. It's got 4 gigs of RAM. We've told it which virtual CD to boot from. We've got our network set up, so we click OK. And once we've got that, we'll go ahead and start the machine. You can double click it, or you can highlight it and click the start button up there at the top. And then it's going to get us into the boot screen here, where it's going to say, do you want to boot it as a live CD? We don't. We actually want to go through the install process here. Live CDs are good if you're, if you're trying to help somebody out access a file on their computer that has crashed. You can install this as a live CD, and then put actually, a live CD actually goes on like a USB stick. You plug that USB stick into their computer, reboot off of the USB stick. Then you've got full access to everything on their computer without overwriting their operating system and losing everything. So, very cool thing to do if you're doing a computer repair for yourself or someone else. We actually want to go down here to the graphical install. We'll go ahead and click OK. And then it's going to take us into the actual setup screen, where we're going to give it some criteria to use for the install. And so here we're going to say, yep, we're going to install this in English. We live in the United States. We're going to use American English for the keyboard. And now it's going to go through an initial thing where it's picking up the files that it needs to do the install. Now it's detecting our network setup. So we're using the ETH0, which is your wired network connection on your computer. And it's configuring the IP address based on the router settings. So the host name, I'm just going to leave as Cali. You can change that if you want. I'm just going to leave it. The domain name, we're not going to deal with domain names here. It gives more information on why you would do that, but we're not even going to bother with it. So we're going to give it a password. I'm actually just typing in password. Don't do that. Don't use password as your password. It's a terrible security thing. This is only for demonstrative purposes. So we're going to click continue. We are in Colorado, so that's mountain time. So now it's detecting our disks, and it's partitioning the disks. We actually just want to use the entire disk. We're not gonna split anything up. We're not gonna put the home and the temp and all that in different partitions. We're just gonna do the whole disk just with a guided setup here. This is kind of your beginner setup here. Yep, we're gonna go ahead and use that 17 gigs. Even though I told it to use 16, it puts some wiggle room in there. So click next. Yeah, we're going to do all the files in one partition. Like it says, this is recommended for new users. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll click continue. And this is like the, are you sure this is what you want to do? It is. We're going to click continue. So now it's saying, this is kind of like the, are you sure you're sure? And yes, we are. So we're going to write these changes to the disk. We'll check yes there and click continue. So now it's actually going through the install process here. This is a little bit time consuming. It'll take a few minutes to go through the whole process, but that's just the way installs go. I remember back in the day, mid to late 90s, even through the early 2000s, installing an operating system. Like if your Windows machine crashed and you had to reinstall Windows, it was you set aside an entire day just to run your CD through, or your CDs, or maybe even a DVD through the install process, downloading all your files, that sort of thing. That is definitely not the case anymore. Now that we can boot from USB drives, and we can use services like 99.com, which I've actually done a video on. If you're really curious about how you can get a bunch of your basic programs installed very, very quickly on a Windows machine, go check out the video I did on 99.com. I've been using them for years, and I absolutely love them. Also, I guess while we're here and while we're waiting for the install process to continue, I should do the whole obligatory. If you like this video so far, you like what I'm doing here on the channel, do me a favor, give the video a thumbs up. It helps me and the channel out a ton, and I would really appreciate it. If you're interested in software videos like this that I've started doing recently, or product review videos, that sort of thing, hit the subscribe button so you can be notified when those new videos come out. And if you really want to help out the channel, do me a favor, find the link in the description down below for my Patreon page. Become a patron, get access to some different stuff, and help me keep the channel going a little easier. So I'm going to go ahead and end my little rant there. We'll go back to the install, and we'll just kind of go through the rest of that. So like I said, this is going to take a few minutes. It's got, it's got a bunch of data to copy over. And, it should only take 3, 4, 5 minutes really to go through this process. Like I may have mentioned earlier, I did this once already, but I think I configured something on the virtual machine incorrectly, and that's what caused the whole system to crash on me. I'm hoping that doesn't happen this time. Hopefully this will install with no issues. I think the issue that I ran into earlier was that I told it to use an Ubuntu base, like when we selected that we were going to use a Debian operating system, I told it to use Ubuntu instead, and I think that may have been part of the issue. I also had half the memory or half of the RAM available and half of the storage space available. So I think there was just some configuration issues that I had there that may have prohibited that from working. So hopefully this goes the way we're hoping it will. It got to about here before it crashed on me. So hopefully we have better luck this time. Here comes the moment of truth. This is more or less what happened is it sped up right there and then it crashed on me. So hopefully we don't have that problem this time. Maybe we're gonna get lucky this time. I honestly, I think it was just a misconfiguration of the virtual machine, but let's fingers crossed and whatnot. Okay, we've definitely made it further this time than we did last time, so that's encouraging. Sure, we're going to go ahead and now ask if we want to use a network mirror to supplement software that's included on the CD-ROM, make newer versions available. Sure, why not? Basically, I think this is going to run updates. We don't need to run a proxy or anything here. So now it's configuring, like I said, it's configuring EPT, which is one of the commands that's used to do things like installing things like that. You could do like a sudo apt-get install and whatever the package name is, instead of using a standard installer like we're used to with Windows. You can do a lot of this stuff in command prompts or terminal windows, I guess they're called in Linux. And like a sudo apt-get install is kind of what you would use for the software to go out to the repositories through installing your Linux install to download the appropriate packages for that program. So now it says this is a new installation and the only operating system on this computer. Again, because we're using a virtual machine here, so it should be safe to install the Grub bootloader as the master boot record. That's fine. That's what we want it to do. So we're going to go ahead and click OK. Yeah, we need to make this bootable, so that's what we're going to select. This is the easier way to do it. So we'll click Continue. So now it's installing our bootloader. That tells the system to use that bit of code, that operating system to load to, instead of making you select what you want to use as your operating system. The only time that would really ever change is if you were doing something like a dual boot. Maybe you had like a Linux install and a Windows install, and you wanted to be able to have both of those installs on one hard drive on one computer without using VMware or a virtual machine. You would tell whichever your primary operating system is to be the bootloader, basically, or to have access to the bootloader, and the other one would be like the secondary. So we don't need to do any of that. So now it says the installation is complete, so it's time to boot to your new system. Make sure to remove the installation data so you boot into the new system rather than restarting the installation. We don't want to restart the installation, so what we're going to do here is we're going to go back over to settings, and we're going to go into storage. Cool. It's actually already been removed, which is very clever. So we'll click OK. We'll minimize this, and we will click Continue. So now it's going to finish up the installation, and it should automatically reboot. From that point, then it should actually just boot right into, it should take us right to the login screen for Kali Linux. Also, something else to be aware of, if you're ever on one of these screens and you're not sure if your install or whatever has stopped, or that the VirtualBox has crashed, or it's not responding or whatever. If you look down here at the bottom, you got all these little icons. This very first one is basically your hard disk, and you'll see a little red dot, or a little dot kind of flicker on there. Think of that as your hard drive activity light that you'd have on your computer. As long as that's flickering fairly regularly and whatnot, you should still be operating with no issues. All right, so now we are rebooting. That's a good sign. All right, so yeah, we just want to go ahead and load that. You don't have to click enter there. There's actually a little countdown at the bottom. I think it gives you like 5 or 10 seconds or whatever. And once it hits 0, it'll automatically boot into whatever's highlighted. In this case, it was Kali Linux, instead of going into the advanced setup for that. So, so your username should be root. Oops. And then whatever password you put in. And then we will give it a second here. Usually the first boot up of any operating system takes longer than it otherwise would, say on subsequent boots. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. So if we were to full screen this, you see how it's got everything just confined to this box. A lot of times, and I'm not even sure if it's the case here. Yeah, so if you go down to the bottom, you can insert a guest editions CD image, and it should, in theory, there it goes, contain software intended to be automatically started. Would you like to run it? Yes. What this is going to do is it's going to let us run this in like our full screen mode. So we're going to go ahead and click run. What? Maybe. Darn it. Let's try that again. Close. Let's unmount that. Or eject. Let's try that again. Maybe that's not an option here. Like I said, I'm not terribly familiar with all the nuances of Kali Linux, so let's try it again. We're gonna click run. Nope. Okay, that's definitely something that maybe we can do in a follow-up video. Or maybe you can do some research on that and figure that out for yourself. That's part of the fun of Linux and learning Linux, is figuring out what works and what doesn't. So we've actually got a full live operating system here. So let's go ahead and pop open Firefox. Yeah, Firefox ESR, and it's got all kinds of information in here. There would be a great amount of resources. For learning Kali Linux, that takes you back to their homepage by default. Just more training and certification stuff, Kali docs, Kali tools. There's all kinds of great information in here that comes just pre-installed, pre-saved on this Firefox install here. So what I want to do actually, just to make sure, I think we've already kind of proved it, we'll go to fast.com. And so we're getting not quite full speed. I would say very, very close to full speed. Typically on my main computer, on my host Windows computer, I hit about 240, 210, still not bad. But yeah, that's really it. That's, oops, let's go back over here. So yeah, that's really it. That's all there is to installing Kali Linux. Like I said, I did have some issues at the beginning. I actually recorded this video twice before this one due to user error on my part. So be very careful about the settings that you choose when you go through that installation process and setting up the virtual machine that you're going to be putting Kali Linux onto. Make sure that in this case we were wanting to use a 64-bit version of Kali Linux. So when you go and you select your platform, choose Debian 64. If you're going to install like Ubuntu, select the Ubuntu platform. If it's Windows, select Windows. Select the appropriate platform for the architecture you're going to be using. It's very important. Otherwise, you'll end up spending an extra hour recording videos you didn't need to record. So again, that's really all there is to installing Kali Linux on. In fact, it's saying there's some updates here already. You can't see that though, so it doesn't matter. But that's really, like I said, all there is to installing Kali Linux on a virtual machine using Oracle's VM VirtualBox on a Windows computer. So hopefully this helps. Hopefully this kind of points you in the right direction on how to install Kali Linux. Again, if you've got any questions or comments or anything, or ideas for other operating systems that you'd like to see installed, do me a favor, leave all that stuff down in the comment section below. I try to tailor my content around what you guys like to watch or what you're interested in. So if you could tell me what software you're interested in, what operating systems you might be interested in, things like that, leave that in the comment section down below. And if you do that, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you can be notified when that video comes out. So thanks for your time. I always appreciate your support, and I'll talk to you in the next one.